Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Talk. I'm Barbara Layton, and I'm pleased to introduce as well my co-host and very dear friend, Jim Vrechos. And we're here today with a very special guest of ours, who I'll introduce in a moment. Thank you for joining us. It's a privilege and an honor to be here every week. We get to just meet and get to intimately know members of the community who are doing extraordinary things, just like so many of you are who are watching us. So with no further ado, our first guest is John Gargano. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
Thank you. John is the Director of Operations for Moby's East Hampton and two of the Moby's in New York City, correct?
The restaurants in New York City aren't called Moby's. It's
Okay.
Brass at New York and Tusk Bar. So
Okay.
there's we have two restaurants in New York plus Moby's in East Hampton.
Okay, great. John, I was reading a little bit about you, and I can't wait for you to talk to the audience. But I came across what you wrote about the hospitality mindset. And some of the points are, make life bigger than self. If we remember that in real life, people are dealing with stuff all around us, then we can change the trajectory of their day too. A restaurant or hospitality is a microcosm for life, and it's great advice. Great advice. John has transformed the experience of hospitality, and I'm going to let John tell you his story from the beginning to the end, because that alone is transformative. Thank you, John.
Thank you for such kind words. I start off by saying that my journey has been lengthy, and for every success that I've acquired or achieved, there's been somebody along the way who has given me the opportunity. So it's not just all about me. I think success in life starts and stops with opportunity, right? And unfortunately, in today's world, not everyone gets opportunities. So I felt my story sends a very powerful message to employers, and especially the hospitality industry, about what can happen when someone's given an opportunity. My childhood was like most others. My parents afforded me all the necessities in life to mature and prosper, and develop. Top 5% of my high school class, never did a lick of homework, straight A's. But like many young people in today's world especially, they don't really have that ability to deal with trauma or things that go wrong in life. So for me, I was working at a funeral home, and a routine life insurance examination revealed I was HIV positive. 1997, a completely different world than it is today for someone with that diagnosis. But at that time, the world wasn't too kind with people that received that diagnosis. So for me, I was a pretty tough individual, but I couldn't handle it. So I ran away from home. I ran away from South Jersey to Philadelphia and started working in the hospitality industry. I landed a job working for George Perrier, one of the best French chefs to ever step foot on American soil. And what I learned was that providing great guest experiences provided me the fuel to continue. Making guests happy was my trade-off for not being happy at all. And with each night, it became almost like an addiction. And you could come and sit in the restaurant, and I would know what you wanted before you even knew what you wanted, right? You put your glass down, it was empty. There was another there before you even thought about it. And what I found was, it was almost like a social experiment, right? That on any given night, if you're doing 200-300 covers, somebody's going to come through your restaurant who has a sick child at home, maybe just lost a family member that week. Maybe it's a young couple who saved for 6 months just to be able to afford to go out and celebrate their anniversary. Their parents may have driven 300 miles to babysit for them so they could afford to go out. So you, as the hospitality professional, you are charged with the responsibility of doing your job and delivering great guest experiences. And when you do that, the reward is phenomenal, right? Everyone I know in the hospitality industry has had very traumatic experiences like myself, and they feed off of that energy of making guests happy. So 6 months went by, and I was working for Chef Perrier, and a couple of the staff members I was working for said, the best place to work in New York City was Union Square Cafe. And they said, but you can forget about it because New York, if you don't have New York experience, they're not hiring you. But I'd like to break the trends. That's kind of who I am. So got on a bus, went to New York. My cousin said I could sleep on her couch. I walked into Union Square Cafe Friday afternoon at 12 o'clock, and I said, I want a job. It was so crowded. There was people bumping into me. I said, this was not a good idea. Like, they're not going to hire you. You have no common sense. But they hired me, and I started working for Danny Meyer. And there, it just got even more intense because everybody knows Danny's known for hospitality, unreasonable hospitality. It's if somebody wanted a diet root beer and we had to go 3 miles to get it, we went to get it.
He was a great teacher of mine.
Yes.
Absolutely.
There was no no. There was no no.
Right.
And I acquired all these traits along the way. But at some point, when you have personal issues or mental health issues that you're not addressing, at some point, work doesn't satisfy it. So I started going out after work, and first it was drinking, then it was recreational drugs. Then that got too expensive, so then I started selling some. And one summer evening in 2001, I sold some recreational drugs to an undercover narcotic agent. It wasn't too much time after that I got sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. 20 years incarcerated, 10 years supervised release. So I went away, broke my heart, my mom's heart, everybody in my family's heart, but I didn't quit. And after a while, 2 or 3 years passed, you got to put yourself in my frame of mind. I'm thinking that I'm going to die from this diagnosis. But you come to realization after a while that, advances in science, it became a really treatable illness. But look at the situation that I'm in. I'm stuck in here. I'm not getting out for 20-some years. My release date's 2 decades in the future. How do you get up in the morning to motivate yourself to even brush your teeth or get a shower? Very difficult.
Or getting the medical care you needed.
That's a whole nother story when it comes to the Bureau of Prisons. But
right.
I didn't get the medical care I needed. Ended up giving me medication that caused osteoporosis in my hips. I needed 2 hip replacements by the time I got out. But I found my solace in prison by teaching other inmates. What I learned in prison was that, life isn't super kind to a lot of people. And I used to remember on visiting day. And for me, on visiting day, I was humiliated when my 70-year-old mother had to go through security clearance and take off, her bra because it had metal on it to get through security to come visit me. But when I looked around at a lot of the members of the Black and brown community, it was normal for them, right? They were ironing their jumpsuits and they had picture tickets and they were out there with their family and they were having fun. And it was striking to me that, this is just a normal stop on the train for them, right? And such a difference in how we're socialized and what we think life is. And it just stuck with me all the way through. And I started teaching them GED, keeping myself active, trying to stay positive. George Bush got elected, no relief. Barack Obama gets elected. You think maybe, he's speaking a good game. He understands that they're giving out a lot of time for nonviolent drug offenses. And let me clarify. First-time offender, nonviolent. got caught with no drugs except for what I sold that person,
So,
but they sentenced me to
what amount?
7 grams.
Not a whole lot.
Not a whole lot,
Still-
but I'll be the first one to say,
Yeah.
I sold a whole lot more. And I deserved to go to prison. I committed a crime. I
Really?
should have went to prison, but not for that long,
Was
right?
prison the place, I don't wanna cut into your story,
No.
which is so moving. I mean, is prison really the place to put people who are having drug issues, though?
No, but the war on drugs, classified all drug offenders in the same category.
Yeah.
And the 1984 crime bill made mandatory minimum sentences where the judges who go to Ivy League colleges and universities and are supposed to be the smartest and most forward-thinking people in the world, we strip them of their power to evaluate offender characteristics when
Yeah.
they're sentencing, right? I had a mandatory
No
minimum.
extenuating
Yes,
circumstances.
I had a
that could-
mandatory minimum sentence. And the judge said to me, Mr. Gargano, this is one of the worst sentences I've ever had to give out.
He
He
couldn't
said,
do anything about it.
but I can't do nothing about it.
Yeah,
The prosecutor looked at me and said, I'm sorry, Mr. Gargano, it's the law,
yeah.
right? So Barack Obama, right after he got reelected, him and Eric Holder announced the clemency initiative, and they said if you're a nonviolent offender, you received more time than you would have you been sentenced at that time. You demonstrated propensity to turn your life around, and you've served more than 50% of your time. Petition the court and ask and tell us why you should come home. So they told us we didn't have to do it ourselves, that there was a clemency project group of 1,500 lawyers that were going to do the petitions for us. But at this point, I'm in 12 and a half years. The first lawyer didn't do me justice.
What prison were you at?
I started off in Butner, North Carolina, then I went to Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama.
Wow. So it's rough place.
No, low security.
No security.
Prison
Okay.
wasn't rough. The rough part was, being away from your family, being away from society, not understanding the unjust amount of time, and really,
The psychological aspects of it.
we house young men in prisons today
Yeah.
like inhumane puppy mills. There is no education,
Right.
right? The only education that's in the Bureau of Prisons is GED, and the only reason that's there is because for each person that gets their GED, the institution gets a check from the government for giving them their GED. And that's the only reason.
That's the incentive.
That's the incentive, right? We have got to start rehabilitating individuals, giving them opportunities, right? If it's not a stroke of luck that 77% of the people that come home from prison go back in 3 years, right? That's a statistic. And that statistic doesn't just shine light.
What is that rate? Is it like 80, is it upwards of 80%?
80%, 80%, 77% go back in 3 years,
Right.
right? 66% of them are unemployed 1 year after they come home, right?
There are programs at work, and I don't want to cut into your story, which is unbelievable, but I'm working with psychiatrist James Gilligan, who ran the Massachusetts prison system, the mental hygiene. The one variable that made all the difference in the world, reducing violence and also keeping people in the prison, was education. 4-year college degree.
Education, right. So
Shutter
let-
Island, by the way, the movie Shutter Island is a pattern after.
So
Anyway,
Warren
that's-
Buffett's sister runs a program at Sing Sing.
Right.
That and these are violent offenders.
Yeah, I've taught
Every
at Sing
single
Sing.
one of them that has received a 4-year degree has not reoffended.
There you go.
Every single one.
That's exactly
We know
right.
100%.
We know that.
Right?
Right.
So the statistics are there.
Yep.
But what do we want to do about it? Right?
Is it-
I started taking some college credits while in college or in prison, but I couldn't afford it for long, so I had to stop. So I sent my petition in and forgot about it. Because in my mind, I'm walking around the compound with a lot of inmates who've got a lot more time than I did, and probably a lot more deserving than I was. But I wrote my petition, they waited for an attorney. So August 3rd, 2016, I was driving a golf cart on the compound at Maxwell doing my job. I was the warden's orderly, and I used to take care of his lawn. And they called me to the lieutenant's office. So I got to the lieutenant's office, and there's about 10 inmates sitting there. And you get called to the lieutenant's office all the time for drama, did you see this, did you see that, what's going on, somebody said this about you. So one by one, they're calling everybody in, and they're coming out and they're cursing and they're slamming the doors and they're like, I can't stand this place. And I'm like, what is going on here, right? So I go in and the warden says, the phone rings. And the warden says, answer the phone. You don't touch the phones in prison, right? You touch the phones in prison, you're not going to see the sun for about 3 years. So I answered the phone, and I'll remember it to the day I die. It was a woman said, John, this is Temi Toby Youssef. I just want to let you know that Barack Obama signed your petition this morning, and you're going home in 4 days. So I had 8 years left on my sentence at the time.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I took the golf cart and I drove out on the compound to this place that I landscaped all the time, and I just sat there and I just thought, like, okay, this is what you wanted. What are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
What are you going to do with it, right? Because we want a lot of things, but how hard are we going to work for it? How are you? This is a blessing. When you are blessed with something, you assume the responsibility to pay it forward, right? And as I was walking out the doors of receiving and discharging, the correction officer looked at me, dead in my eyes, and he was serious. He said, I'll see you when you get back.
Yeah, they always say that. Right.
I'll see you when you get back.
Right.
And I said,
Because they weren't preparing you for...
not prepare me for release.
Right.
I was in a federal camp.
Right.
I was in prison for 13 years. They couldn't even figure out how to let me leave with identification and a social security card or driver's license.
Exactly.
Right? So I left. Barack Obama, in conjunction with the Three Strikes Project at Stanford Law, they sent somebody to pick up, everybody who got clemency were picked up at their institution and brought to their halfway house. So this guy picked me up, he took me to Maxwell Air Force Base. I remember getting in the airport, and everyone in the airport, they're like this. And I said, Stephen, what are they doing? Right? Because when I went away, phones were like flip phones or whatever. He's like, they're on phones. I'm like, that's a phone, right? I didn't know what a phone looked like at that point. So I just made a commitment that day that I wasn't going back, and that I was going to beat the odds. But I wasn't just going to beat the odds for me. I was going to beat the odds for those young men. I could still look over my shoulder right now and see their faces on the fence as I was leaving, right?
Where did you go?
When I left,
After you left, yeah.
so they made me go. Another great thing our government does is they make you go back to the jurisdiction that you committed your crime in. So even though my entire family was in New Jersey, they made me go to New York. So I'm in a halfway house in New York,
Crazy.
In the city.
in the city, in the Bronx. And I just started working, and
Restaurant?
well, I started applying for a job, but
Apply for a job, right.
one by one, nobody gave me a chance.
Right.
It was,
'Cause of your
I checked the box, I didn't check the box, I ripped the application in half so they couldn't see it, but everybody just kept saying the same thing. I'm sorry, Mr. Gargano, we choose to go in another direction. But I knocked on the door at River Park, one of Tom Colicchio's restaurants, and luckily he had a management team that believed in giving people opportunities.
Where's River Park now?
29th and First Avenue.
Okay, good.
And I started working as a $10 an hour beer garden cashier. But I was the first one to work. I was the last one to leave. I knew Barbara wanted mayonnaise on her French fries, not ketchup. I knew Barbara wanted to sit at table 12, right?
That's hospitality.
And and I just
Absolutely.
continued that process. 3 months later, I was a server. 3 months later, I was a manager. 3 months later, I was director of hospitality. I went back to college at Hostos Community College in the Bronx.
Right.
My business communications professor, Sandy Figueroa, God bless her soul, she's still one of my biggest supporters, nominated me for a scholarship to go to NYU. NYU gave me a scholarship, and I graduated from NYU in 2021 as a commencement speaker with a 391 in leadership.
Wow.
The day I graduated, Tom called me up, and him and his director of operations at the time, Justin, made me the GM of his flagship restaurant, Craft.
Holy moly.
And in 1 year, we tore Craft down to its core and built it back up and broke every record they had. And we did it by making sure that every guest every night had a great experience. But we did it by providing opportunities for people, right? We employed adults with disabilities, made them polished glassware. We took that person whose English wasn't the best and gave them the skills that they need to be servers and captains.
Is the restaurant industry basically open to that? Has it been a?
So it hasn't been.
Historically,
It hasn't been. You know, the restaurant industry is one of the last industries in the world where someone without a fancy degree or
Right.
can
Yeah.
make it all the way to the top. A lot of these chefs don't have degrees, but we also can be the trendsetter. We can teach other industries that don't judge somebody on their worst day.
Yeah.
If all of us sat in a room, closed our eyes, and said, "What is the worst thing I ever did in my life?" And then once we determined what that was, if we tattooed that on our forehead, nobody would want to be judged by that.
But John, what you're talking about is what hospitality is supposed to be. We've had this conversation. Hospitality businesses have they provide such an amazing venue to really uplift and change people's lives. They really do,
On so many levels.
on so many
you
levels.
You take a kid, right? I remember being at Kraft, and I said, "Tom, this is so difficult. We're post-pandemic. The pool of workers was very, very thin." I said, "We're trying to teach 25-year-olds who have never been to a five-star restaurant what it means to give five-star service." A lot of them don't have fathers, don't have mothers. Their grandmom raised them, right? Some of them are in foster homes, right? But when you take that person and you teach them a skill, and they become a captain and a server, and they're making $100,000 a year, you didn't just change their life. You changed their kid's life, their girlfriend's life, their partner's life. Somebody in that neighborhood might see them. You might even change their life.
And everybody who came to the restaurant is changed.
Exactly.
I remember Andre Saltner at Lutece, right? 4-star restaurant, one of the greatest chefs ever. He used to come out after dinner, and he would have his famous souffle. So what sharing again.
And society is
Being
thirsty for
hospitable.
that.
Yeah,
Society is
absolutely,
thirsty to support
absolutely.
businesses who support their values.
Yeah.
Right?
I would tell all of my employees, because I had a restaurant for a number of years, that they, in this business, use every opportunity to learn about who you are as a human being. Regardless of what the situation is, you're in such a great position to know who you are as a human being.
100%.
Yep.
100%. And I say this all the time, right? We as consumers make decisions about where we want to spend our money. We should spend our money with businesses who share our values, right? All of us, especially in today's world, all of us have known people who have made mistakes. All of us have known people who went to prison, right? Those people, sure, some of them, their intentions aren't sincere, but we should give them opportunities, give them a chance to prove who they are. And when they're successful, it's so much less expensive having them working and paying taxes than being
Absolutely.
in prison rotting. Right? For them, for their kids, you can change generations of a family by providing one opportunity to one person. And Humans of New York, a photo journal essay, Instagram profile wrote a story about me. And after it came out, every single night, Kraft was booming with people
Absolutely.
that wanted to support Tom
Sure.
because he provided second chances.
Exactly.
We do that at Moby's, right? Where, we just applied for J-1 visas for 2 young kids from Jamaica who are the most humble, incredible chefs that want to come here, want to build a life, want to support our businesses, want to train other people.
And it's a tough
That's what you
business
do.
because most restaurants fail, right?
100%. 100%.
Right.
So John, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Because we're definitely, time is ticking. I have many questions for you. What advice, especially during these uncertain, tumultuous times, what advice would you give to someone who feels trapped, whether literally or by circumstances, in finding a path to hope and success?
Never quit.
Like,
Never quit. Never quit.
Never quit.
If you get knocked down 15 times a day, get up 16 times.
right.
Right? Seek out people who have been in experiences like you. In today's world with social media and Instagram and Facebook, there are outlets out there. There are tons of organizations that, like you mentioned earlier, society has understood that we can't keep spending $80 billion a year on a Bureau of Prisons
Right.
and keep building institutions. We should model our penal system and our criminal justice system like Sweden, right? Where someone goes
The
to,
Nordic
Absolutely,
model, the
exactly.
Nordic
they
model.
go to prison, we
Exactly.
teach them a skill.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
come home and they contribute to society, right? And then you didn't break up family units. The kids grow up with parents, and if we do that for one generation, if each one of us takes one person and gives them opportunity and change their life, it only takes us all to do one. We're not talking about that many people. Right? And that $80 billion could be 20 billion. And how much could we do for our schools and for our young kids with $60 billion extra federal money?
Absolutely.
We can spend $600 billion on an election.
Absolutely, and it's beginning to change. There are
It's
more
insane.
programs now coming
Insane.
back. Pell grants
Yes.
are being offered. And so
100%.
I've taught prisons myself, and it's very, very important. The education model is so important, the Nordic model.
And running restaurants, John, especially the way you do it, what keeps you grounded on a daily basis?
Just be humble. Just be humble.
What gives you the strength and the courage? and-
knowing where I've been, right? Every day is a blessing. I've been so thankful in my career to have people like the owners at Moby's, Liz Newmarket, Great Performances, gave me an opportunity when I left Kraft, and Tom. Employers like that give me the fuel, right? A month ago, I had the pleasure of meeting Barack Obama face to face. You know, and he looked at me and he told me that meeting me was the highlight of his month, and he can't tell me how proud he is of me,
Wow.
right? Because he was criticized so much about these initiatives. And of all the people he let out of prison, 2,400 people, probably on two hands, how many people have went back?
Wow.
Because they were given the support, right? They were given the chance to get an education. They were given the luxuries of being able to get safe housing.
Have them out at Moby's.
Oh, one I love to.
Next time he's vacationing out of East Hampton. We're running out of time again. This is
We were at Moby's the
unbelievable.
other night for a chamber get-together, and John and his team were amazing. I highly recommend going to Moby's, spending time with John. And John, thank you for inspiring us all, each and every one of us. And don't forget, everything and anything is possible.
Everything, anything,
Never forget that.
100%.
And absolutely, the first time I met you, John, I'm
My pleasure.
so moved by your story, and I will visit
But you
you
have
at
to tell
Moby's.
it. It has to be out there.
Absolutely.
It took me a long time to have the courage to tell it, but I tell it because in every corner of every city in this country, there's a young me
Absolutely.
who
Absolutely.
thinks their life's over.
John, you
And it's not.
continue to change lives with that story. Absolutely.
Thank you, John, so very, very much.
Till next time, Real Talk.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.